What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, May 2nd, rather. Middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone and put you on the air. Our third hour guest today is Alfonso E. Chavez, and he's got a very interesting story to tell about how his family came to the United States. He's a legal American citizen. And his father was a doctor, and I'll let him fill in the rest of the story because it was very interesting when he shared it with me, and I decided it was worth sharing with all of you as well. Now, the world is still responding to Benjamin Netanyahu's presentation on Monday about how Iran lied about having a nuclear weapons program. The IAEA has released a statement on this, and they have effectively rejected Netanyahu's claims that Iran has been lying about its nuclear activities by referencing one of their own reports showing there were no credible indications of activities in Iran relevant to the development of a nuclear explosive device after 2009. And the IAEA said documents released by Israel about Tehran's nuclear weapons program do not reveal anything new. And it basically said IAEA knew all about Project Ahmad. They knew that it ended in 2003. The people working on it were assigned to other tasks. And this information was turned over to the IAEA as part of the groundwork for the P5+1 deal. And as I reported yesterday, the latest theory is that in point of fact, Mossad did not get into Iran and steal a warehouse full of documents and drive to Israel in just one night, but they hacked into the IAEA's database and simply downloaded copies, and they put them in all those binders and all those CDs mounted on the board, to make an impressive looking show. Look at what we've got. See, isn't this better than a cartoon bomb? But the IAEA has basically said there's nothing new here. That IAEA knew about all this. They didn't think it was relevant. And Israel's just lying again. And analysts are reminding everybody that Netanyahu is the wrong person to accuse Iran of seeking nuclear weapons, as his country has nuclear weapons, tried to sell one to South Africa, refuses to sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which makes U.S. financial aid to Israel illegal, refuses IAEA inspections. So it's tremendously hypocritical of Israel to be out there screaming about anybody else's nuclear weapons. Article that came out of the New York Times. I have to give them credit here. Normally, they echo whatever the standing political agenda is, but they came on out and said, this is Benjamin Netanyahu's nuclear nothing burger. Going to have to come up with a new graphic for that one. And the New York Times is reporting, these materials were already widely known, and they covered this weapons program that was shut down in 2003, perhaps because Iran's leaders reckoned they were next on the American hit list after Saddam Hussein, and they did not want to get caught with their hand in the nuclear cookie jar. Or perhaps with Iraq disarmed by the United States, it no longer needed the program. But this presentation by Netanyahu is being exploited all over the place by the war hawks who are saying, we've got to get Iran, we've got to get Iran. I'm sure John McCain is back up there dancing around saying, bomb, 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 Iran. But this information was already studied in a 2007 United States National Intelligence Estimate that began with the statement, we judge with high confidence that in the fall of 2003, Tehran halted its nuclear weapons program. So Netanyahu's just trying to stir up trouble again. And his presentation has triggered a Twitter storm. People are making fun of it. They're making fun of the outdated technology, wondering why Netanyahu hasn't heard of flash drives, which were invented in Israel and used one to have all the documents instead of shelves of binders and CDs. Well, the shelves of binders and CDs was a stage prop to make it look like they had a lot of information. If Netanyahu just held up a little tiny flash drive, nobody knows what's on it or how much is on it. A lot of people in Twitter were lamenting the poor IDF soldiers who had to paste those CDs to the wall and lug around the binders for the display. Looking at a photo of those CDs, to me, since I burn a lot of my own CDs, it doesn't even look like there's anything on them. I think they're blank. So another one joked, this is actually a former Jerusalem Post reporter, Ben Hartman joked, the Iranian regime has all of their old free America Online download discs and they're using them to build a nuclear weapon. So they're all making fun of Netanyahu now. And of course, Trump has just leapt on board this and said, see, this proves I was 100% right. And so Trump is going to get dragged down with Netanyahu as the world turns its back on this. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're talking about Netanyahu's nuclear duck presentation on Monday and the continuing war talk regarding Iran. And over in Israel, Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman is warning Iran not to tangle with Israel. Now, again, you need to remember, Iran has not initiated a war of conquest against another country in 200 years. It's not their nature. And you contrast that with Israel or the United States, who can't seem to go 6 months without bombing somebody. So, again, it's a lot of tough talk coming out of Iran. Somebody just wrote on in saying he's pretty sure he saw a Led Zeppelin disc up there on that display board with all the other CDs. Now, Netanyahu is out there saying that Israel doesn't seek war with Iran, which, of course, is standing in direct contrast to statements made by other members of his government. And maybe Netanyahu is actually speaking the truth. He wants Americans to have a war with Iran, like they did with Iraq. Israel wanted Iraq broken up, but they didn't want to do it themselves. They got the Americans to do it. Now they're trying to do the same thing with Iran. But Netanyahu is still doing interviews all over the air that Iran is brazenly lying about its nuclear ambitions prior to the 2015 Iran nuclear agreement. But interestingly enough, Netanyahu, when actually pressed on the issue of Israel's nukes, refused to answer. And on CNN, Benjamin Netanyahu was being interviewed by Chris Cuomo, and Chris Cuomo said, a yes-no question for you. You know where I'm going with this. Does Israel have nuclear capabilities and nuclear weapons, yes or no? Netanyahu replied, we've always said we won't be the first to introduce it, so we haven't introduced it. Cuomo said, that's not an answer to the question, do you have them or not? And Netanyahu said, it's as good an answer as you're going to get. Now remember, not too long ago, there was a leak of a Colin Powell email that confirmed Israel has at least 200 nuclear weapons, and most of them are pointed at Iran. So, and again, in spite of the existence of a nuclear arsenal, one of the biggest in the world, Israel will not sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which makes it illegal for the U.S. government to continue to give it aid. Iran has no nuclear weapons and is under nonstop verbal threat from Israel warmongers and their surrogates in the United States. Now, the P5+1 deal was very simple. Iran would stop its nuclear activities, which at that time, 2015, was focused on a civilian power station, medical isotopes, things like that. And Iran stopped all of that. The IAEA has confirmed it. The the U.S. part of the deal was they were going to rescind all the sanctions against Iran. And the UN never kept that promise. They rescinded some of the sanctions, and then Congress promptly voted new sanctions onto Iran. So it's really the United States that's been acting in bad faith on this deal. Now, you need to remember, when the former government of South Africa, the apartheid government, fell, documents were discovered showing an arrangement between Israel and the former government of South Africa to sell South Africa a nuclear weapon, the very activity the Non-Proliferation Treaty is intended to prevent. So that paperwork surfaced and basically represents official documentation that, yes, indeed, Israel does possess nuclear weapons. Now, another thing that people need to remember is that Israel loves to get weapons from the West, primarily the United States. They won't hesitate to sell them around the world, including to Iran. And we did a flashback story about how the Homeland Security Department was investigating Israel because Israeli arms dealers were sending spare parts for fighter planes to Iran, flouting an international arms embargo and contradicting the bitter enmity between the Jewish state and the Islamic regime. But it makes money, and that makes it all okay here. Now, Vladimir Putin is throwing his weight into the argument over the P5+1, and he is siding with Emmanuel Macron and Angela Merkel, saying that the deal should move forward, that it's working. It's brought some peace to the region outside of the U.S. interventions. So he's adding his voice to the mix on that issue. Boris Johnson is out there saying that Great Britain should stick to the nuclear deal despite Israel claims of Iran lying. So nobody's buying Netanyahu's presentation. Meanwhile, over in Iran, following last Sunday's major airstrike by Israel into Syria, Hassan Nasrallah is saying that Israel is now in direct confrontation with Iran. And he's basing it basically on the attack on the T4 base or airport on the outskirts of Homs, and that targeted Iranian forces. And then, of course, there was the other attack on Sunday. So, yeah, Israel is attacking Iranian assets inside Syria, where they have no right to be. It's a blatant act of war against not only Iran, but Syria as well. Now, there's an article that came out in Russia today. U.S. plan of last push against ISIS raises specter of Syria partition. And we know that this has been talked about many times before. State Department spokeswoman Heather Nauert said yesterday that the operations will be conducted by the U.S.-led coalition and local partners, including the Kurdish majority Syrian Democratic Forces. The U.S. will also work with Turkey, Israel, Jordan, Iraq, and Lebanon to secure their borders from Islamic State, formerly ISIS, ISIL, whatever they're calling themselves this week. This is intriguing because the only remaining ISIS presence is near the Iraqi border, with a pocket south of Damascus, which is currently being cleared out by Syrian government forces. Well, we know that one of the plans for Syria all along has been to balkanize it, to break off a chunk of it for a new independent Kurdistan. And it looked like that plan was on at the beginning, then it looked like it was dropped, now it looks like it's back on again. So, meanwhile, more American and French military convoys are arriving in northern Syria to the town of Manbij, northeast of Aleppo province. And again, it's looking more and more like the U.S. is just going to go on and declare war on Syria. Now, originally, it was all about Assad. He's evil, he's bad, he's gassing his own people. Then they changed the story and said, well, we're really going in there as part of the war on terror to get ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And now ISIS and Al-Qaeda are all but gone. And so now it's back to Assad is gassing his people. He's a very evil person. We have a duty to protect those Syrian people by bombing the heck out of them. Apparently, U.S.-led fighter jets bombed the Syrian army positions in eastern Deir ez-Zor after the army's advances against the Washington-backed Syrian Democratic Forces in the province. So, yeah, U.S. warplanes are bombing Syrian government forces. That is an act of war. And apparently, another airstrike in the eastern Syrian province of Hasaka killed at least 23 civilians, including 10 children. So, yeah, we're definitely helping those Syrian people against the evil Assad. Russia is going ahead with supplying Syria with the S-300 missiles, which will give the Syrian government control over its own skies. It is seen as a threat to Israel's aerial superiority over parts of the Syrian region. And down in Israel, Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman is saying that if the S-300 is used against any Israeli warplanes, that Israel will attack the S-300 launch platforms. Good luck getting in close enough to do that. But again, the war talk is ratcheting up and bringing us closer to direct conflict between U.S. forces and Russian forces. Now, Russian forces have already been killed in some of these attacks, and some Americans have also been killed. The Americans were embedded with ISIS, and that's the only reason the U.S. didn't make a big stink about it, was it would confirm what we already know, that ISIS was actually a tool of the U.S. to use against Bashar al-Assad. More of the U.S.-backed terrorists have surrendered to Russian military in eastern Kwalamun, and they're handing over weapons that are U.S. and NATO supplied. So it's another reminder of who these terrorists really were working for. Now, we're getting a report. This is coming from Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova, talking about how these witnesses to the alleged chemical attack in Duma were taken up to The Hague to basically testify. And they took something like, I think, a couple of dozen witnesses. Only 6 were allowed to testify. But apparently, some of the reporters from the corporate media were caught trying to pressure the witnesses to change their story and say there was a chemical attack. And one reporter over at the BBC is claiming that a 12-year-old Syrian witness sustained psychological trauma and simply doesn't remember there was a chemical attack. So they're racing on a busted flush with this one. But again, the problem with the government lie is they can't back off it. They can't back up and say, oh, well, I guess we were wrong, you caught us. They have to maintain that image of governmental infallibility or corporate media infallibility, or people lose trust in the government. Of course, most Americans have already lost trust in the government. Over in Donetsk, in response to the announcement that the U.S. is sending Javelin missiles to Kiev, they're talking tough and saying, we're not scared of the U.S. supplied missiles to Ukraine. And that these javelins will not give any advantage to Ukrainian troops in the Donbass. Now, either that means they've got some really tough tanks, or they're going to be fighting an unconventional war. Probably the latter. You know, learning the lessons from Vietnam. Even with the U.S. decided advantage in hardware, we still lost that one. Now, Tokyo is getting ready to host a summit with Chinese and South Korean top politicians on the 9th of this month, which also happens to be Claire's birthday. And apparently Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Premier of the Chinese State Council Li Keqiang, and South Korean President Moon Jae-in will discuss the result of Moon's meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, as well as other issues of the international agenda. Now, the Kyodo News Agency reported that Abe had already confirmed the trilateral meeting would be held on May 9th. So it's good that everybody is getting together and talking. And I still think we may see some kind of a surprise come out of North and South Korea, because I don't think Kim Jong-un is really that naive to trust a U.S. promise not to invade. He's got something up his sleeve. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about Korea, and there are still people out there trying to shove a monkey wrench into the gears of toning down that situation. I'm looking at this article that came out of the original antiwar.com, and it's talking about National Security Advisor John Bolton. And he's not interested in a denuclearization deal to the public. In fact, he's working actively to undermine it. And according to this article, there is strong circumstantial evidence that he leaked intelligence to a Washington think tank sympathetic to his views in order to generate media questioning about the president's announced plan to reach an agreement with North Korea's leader. So Bolton wants a war with North Korea. Well, John, here's your rifle. Here's your parachute. Here's your day-glow orange jumpsuit left over from the torture centers. And go and have fun. Now, over in Myanmar, a UN Security Council envoy is saying that the government of Myanmar must conduct a proper investigation into the alleged atrocities against the Rohingya Muslims in the northwestern state of Rakhine. And during a visit to both the Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh and Myanmar's restive Rakhine state, from whence the Rohingya were driven, British ambassador to the UN, Karen Pierce, spoke to several women and girls who recounted their ordeals and pleaded for the UN's help. There is a lot of evil going on in the world. We're seeing it in Myanmar. We're seeing it in Palestine. We're seeing it, obviously, in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Yemen, Syria, and everywhere else the U.S. has got military that we don't know about. Now, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas made a speech the other day which has drawn huge criticism. Now, in his speech, Abbas claimed that one of the reasons Jews had been persecuted over the centuries was because of their social behavior related to interest and banking. And basically said the Ashkenazi Jews are descended from the medieval Khazar converts to Judaism and not the ancient Hebrews. And of course, he was immediately attacked because Israel's hold on Palestine is based on the claim that the modern Ashkenazi Jews are in fact descended from the biblical Hebrews. Now, there's a very good book called The 13th Tribe that documents the fact that the Central Asian Khazars did convert to Judaism in about 800 AD, and then centuries later were driven northward into Russia and westward into Europe as Khazaria fell. It's well documented. And if you look at the Ashkenazi Jews and their lily white skin, they don't even look like they're Middle Eastern. So Abbas is being attacked. Netanyahu is accusing Abbas of Holocaust denial and just screaming bloody murder about it. Truth is being criminalized in this world. I mean, look at that law that just passed in South Carolina, where it is now a crime to criticize the government of Israel. South Carolina has said that criticism of Israel does represent anti-Semitism, which makes about as much sense as saying that criticism of the Nazis represents hate of the German people. But Israel hates freedom of speech. They want it gone. They want you to believe what they tell you to believe, and that's going to be it. Steven Spielberg is now out there saying that there should be mandatory Holocaust education in all U.S. public schools. So they're really pushing this. They want to resell the hoax because they exploit it. Oh, remember the Holocaust, give us money. Oh, remember the terrible things the Nazis did before all of us were born, give us some weapons. There's apparently a new training program by Israeli police where they're teaching school children how to shoot Palestinians. And apparently this was caught at the Menashe Regional Council near Haifa, and it was brought to light when Palestinian citizens took photos of what was happening. And basically, it was students were given paintball guns to fire at cutouts of men and women wearing checkered keffiyeh headscarves that are associated with the Palestinians. In other words, the Israeli schools are desensitizing the school children psychologically to make them ready to kill Arabs, or to make it easier for them to kill Arabs. Now, can you imagine what would happen if somebody in the United States school system set up an exercise where school children were given paintball guns and told to fire at cutouts of, for example, black people or Hispanics? Can you imagine the outcry that would occur? Anyway, we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take a phone call now from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I had a couple things to say, but I don't know if you heard Israeli jets have just entered, this was in the past half an hour, entered Lebanon. They were seen flying low over Beirut City. So I don't know where they're headed or where they're going.
Well,
isn't it amazing how they can just go into somebody's airspace, like them coming into your house, for no reason, they can just come into your house, it's amazing how we do the same thing. It's like, they don't believe in sovereignty.
No, they don't. And Lebanon has shown tremendous restraint in not shooting these planes down. Of course, Lebanon is afraid that Israel is looking for an excuse to invade them yet again. But obviously, I would say that those Israeli planes are heading to basically launch a standoff attack into Syria, possibly against Damascus. And they're going to move fast on this because Netanyahu's little dog and pony show on Monday is falling apart very quickly. So if they're going to ratchet up the war, they got to do it right now.
Hey, Mike, I know you mentioned they want the Litani River because Israel only has 23. They think 23 to 25 years left of water. That's it.
Well, I mean, they waste a lot of it. They keep most of it for themselves. The Palestinians have very little water compared to the average Israeli. But they want that Litani River. There's no question about it.
No, Mike, the Palestinians get water. They pump the sewage. The Israelis pump their sewage into Palestinian areas. This is how much of... no, it's not the Israeli people, Mike. I know we got to keep saying it. It's not the American people, the Israeli people, the British people, or the French people, or even the Saudi Arabian average citizen, not the Wahhabis, but it's the government. It's a small group of people like the John Boltons and, the Lindsey Grahams and this oligarchy, the Clintons, the Bushes. This is the people, Netanyahu, etc., Tony Blair. These are the people that are making the policy. Because otherwise, the average citizens of the world, they don't want any war.
Well,
nobody benefits from...
We do need to point out that the residents of those illegal settlements in the West Bank do behave very badly toward the Palestinians. And as you say, they like to pump their raw sewage onto the Palestinian farmlands or even into the Palestinian wells. And some of these settlers have even gone so far as to pour cement into the Palestinian wells in order to basically deprive the Palestinians of water. The settlers want the Palestinians gone. Obviously people who have made that move to the illegal settlements, they're of a certain mindset. Remember, there was this video that came out not too long ago about this young Israeli settler, late teens, early 20s, carrying a bottle of hard liquor, drunk, and just screaming that, God gave him this land and you all have to go away. In fact, I'm going to put that back up, I think.
Like, are all those Israelis? Yeah, I don't consider them part of Israel because they're like super extremists.
Yes.
But I mean, are those people like worshippers of the Talmud? That's probably it, right? Like they're worshippers of the God's chosen one, right? The settlers, that live on the land, like to live, to take land that's not theirs. That's basically these are extremists.
Yes.
All cultures got them, unfortunately. But like I said, Mike, before, Putin, he's not going to let this crap go on forever. Going to come a time when he's going to have to smack the Israelis down, and it's up to the U.S. to decide if they want to get involved. And Britain and France will probably sit that one out.
I would like to hope that they would sit it out, but I don't think so. As you were saying just a little while ago, policies being set by our leaders, and our leaders are not listening to us. They're listening to each other. They're listening to whoever writes them the biggest check. They're listening to Netanyahu, and it does seem like at this point a major war is now inevitable. And it's very frustrating and angering for me because I've spent the last third of my entire life trying to educate and lure the populace away from this enthusiasm for blood. And I know the ordinary American people, they're tired of war. We've been at war for 18 years. They're tired of the costs. They're tired of seeing their children come home in wheelchairs and metal coffins. They're tired of seeing the wartime economy, which is destroying, basically decaying our nation away in front of our eyes. But our government seems to think war is the best option right now to solve the problems they themselves made.
Hey, Mike, I wanted to switch to Ukraine if I got any time left.
Sure.
Mike, I'm sure that the people of Donbass and the what was the other region? Donbass and Lugansk.
Yeah, Donetsk and Lugansk. Yes.
So yeah, I'm probably sure they'll be happy when they get those javelins because you know what happened last time? The Ukrainians either fled or they fled into Russia, the army and the Navy. 99% of the Navy went and left the rubber dinghy for the Poroshenko. But remember, they left behind all that NATO brand new equipment, like the jammers and all that?
Yep.
So I'm thinking the people of Donbass will thank NATO for the javelins and the U.S., right? I would think. Because, Mike, Putin and the Russians can be in, if they wanted, in France in 5 days, Mike. But they don't want to be there because there's nothing in France. There's nothing in Europe that they want.
That's true. That's true. I remember when they were pushing this whole thing about, Russia's planning on invading Europe, and my response was, why would they? It's bankrupt. The place has been trashed by the open borders. Putin's got enough problems with Russia. He doesn't need to be taking either Europe or the United States problems onto his shoulders right now.
Yeah, so that's funny. Like, I always heard that, like, Russia's going to invade us, or there's nothing here. What? Were they going to invade Chicago? Yeah, were they going to rebuild it?
I remember when I was a kid, during the first Cold War, we were getting this in school. The Soviets are just waiting for a chance to come over here and take what we have. And I remember looking around that little ramshackle schoolhouse and saying, what do we have that's worth the trouble? And they'd come back and say, well, they want our new shiny cars. I said, isn't it cheaper to buy them and import them rather than try and invade? It's one of the reasons my teachers didn't like me so much.
Well, Mike, realize, Ford sells more cars in China now?
Yes. And
so does GM. So that's the future. It's the Belt and the Road. Russia, China, and Iran, they stick to that. They have a sealed off land area. U.S. might control the seas per se. We don't know that because we haven't seen the, the hypersonic missiles or the anti-ship missiles and, the super cavitating torpedoes, how that would work out. We know how it would work out, but, they control a land bridge.
Yes.
That's why they got the Belt and the Road, and they have that whole railroad infrastructure all set up. They can just plaster the area with S-400s and Panzer S-1s and Tours. It'd be at the fortress. But that's the future, Mike. I mean, and I keep hearing people saying, like, make America great again. America doesn't exist as it is anymore. It's an empire. It's United States of Empire. And people need to realize that. It's not the country the Founding Fathers left us.
No, it isn't.
Totally different place, man. And Mike, I don't think we'll ever get it back. Trump's failed. I know people calling in still hoping out hope, but why is the caravan of people going over the border? What has Trump done? No tax cuts I've seen has helped anybody.
Except the ultra-rich.
What did he help? Yeah, but I'm saying, what has he done, though, that's fixed anything? Things are either the same or worse now, Mike.
They're worse. They're worse.
know?
The wars are escalating. We're heading toward a global conflict, which very easily could go nuclear. And it does seem like the inmates are now in charge of the asylum, at least in Washington, D.C.
But Mike, I want to leave one last thing before I get off. Remember when Gaddafi, Trump says he sold. This is what I remember about Trump. I voted for him, but I made a mistake. He said, remember when he sold Gaddafi some land, and then Trump said, I don't know if you remember, he said like he ripped them off or something like that. I remember that quote. Trump says like he gypped Gaddafi on a parcel of land, or that he sold Gaddafi. So this is the dude we're dealing with. I think we all been duped, Mike. I mean, that's what's coming down to, right?
Yeah, we did not get the Donald Trump that we voted for, but I still think had Hillary won or succeeded in stealing the White House, we'd be a lot further into that global conflict.
Two sides of the same coin, Mike, right? Two sides of the same coin.
I do think Trump is an outsider, and that's why official Washington is still trying to get rid of him. My primary argument with Trump right now is he's coming across as a weak and ineffectual leader. He's too easily swayed by his advisors. He succumbs to flattery, and he waffles. He changes his mind back and forth. He doesn't have a firm grasp of what his positions and policies are, and that's why it's so easy for others to basically say, well, why don't you try and do this?
Yeah, unfortunately, he's got his new oligarchy, Mike Bolton, Gina Haspel, Kushner, and Pompeo. That's one oligarchy for another. I don't know, Mike. It's like,
well, he definitely put together a war cabinet. There's no question about it. Everybody that's surrounding him now, they all think war is a really good idea. And I think we ought to take a C-130 cargo plane, put them all inside, and send them over to the front lines and give them a taste of what war is really all about. Because from where they're sitting, it's like a giant Nintendo set.
But we got to at least give them some slingshots to use, Mike.
Maybe. I prefer
slingshot with a marble.
Paintball guns.
All right, thanks a lot, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Speaking of C-130s, they seem to be dropping out of the skies a lot these days. Apparently, a Puerto Rico Air National Guard plane crashed in Georgia earlier this day on a training mission. And over in Libya, they had another crash of a C-130, and they're trying to figure out what happened. All they really know is it suffered an explosion shortly after takeoff, which brought the aircraft down. So, more wonderful American-built military machinery. Israel has canceled the U.S.-based test of its Arrow 3 missile defense system until, quote, maximum readiness is ensured, end quote. Meaning they don't think it's ready to work. They don't want to be embarrassed by it. And everybody's stretched all across the globe here. Over in Germany, they have 128 Eurofighter Typhoon jets, 128, of which only 4 are ready to fly real combat missions. And the rest are off combat status due to dysfunctional self-defense systems and a lack of air-to-air missiles. So it's one thing to be spending huge amounts of money for a military and quite another to be spending huge amounts of money and still not have a working military. 4 out of 128 jets. That is pretty bad. Pretty bad. Now, there's a federal judge who has just decided that Iran was somehow responsible for 9/11. No evidence. The judge simply declared a true finding. In other words, he's convinced, he believes it to be true. And as a result, he has ordered Iran to pay more than $6 billion, with a B, dollars, to victims of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, despite the fact that most of the alleged hijackers were actually Saudi, and no direct link was ever found to Iran. But the judge just went ahead. District Judge George Daniels said, no, it's Iran. It's Iran, $6 billion. So it's another way to goad Iran, because if Iran refuses to pay the $6 billion, there'll simply be more sanctions. It's another prod, trying to get Iran to do something that can be pointed at as, oh my goodness, look what Iran did. We must respond militarily. We'll have Germany send in their Tornado fighters, all 4 of them. Now, over at the Judiciary Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, the chairman, Bob Goodlatte, is saying it is time for an investigation into the allegations that the Obama Justice Department pressured the FBI to shut down its investigation of the Clinton Foundation during the 2016 presidential election. Now, that is the time when the truth about the foundation should have been made public, so the American people had good information, that they were truly informed when they went to that ballot box. But apparently, the Obama Justice Department pressured the FBI, which is a tacky no-no, to shut it down. And we've been hearing that Andrew McCabe got a phone call from a Justice Department official saying, you know, this is a done deal. It's all over. It's a very inappropriate phone call. Goodlatte is also out there saying that maybe it's time for a real investigation of the Clinton Foundation to find out what was going on. And I applaud him for getting up there and saying it. I don't think it's going to happen, because I think everybody inside official Washington, all the power players, they're dirty. And they're tangled up with the Clinton Foundation, either using it as a slush fund, money laundering, tax avoidance, whatever. Nobody wants that can of worms opened. It would bring the entire government down. Now, over at the U.S. Department of State, Mike Pompeo is out there saying that he will make the State Department great again, as he basically trash talks Rex Tillerson on his first day in office. Now, I'm not sure what he means by making the State Department great again, because his job technically is to carry out the policies set by the White House. But there's a very disturbing quote in there about how the United States Diplomatic Corps needs to be in every corner, every stretch of the world, executing missions on behalf of this country. So it sounds to me like Mike Pompeo wants to run the State Department like he ran the Central Intelligence Agency. We saw what kind of trouble we got into with that back at that consulate in Benghazi. Now, Rod Rosenstein is now firing back at the talk of a possible impeachment, saying the Department of Justice is not going to be extorted. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And as we were talking about before the commercial break, there is talk of impeachment for Rod Rosenstein. And Rosenstein is out there saying, we're not going to be extorted. And that's in response to the comments by Republicans that the impeachment documents are a last resort. So Rosenstein then went on to say, we're going to do what's required by the rule of law. Now that right there is a very bogus statement for 2 reasons. First of all, the way that Rod Rosenstein appointed Robert Mueller as special counsel to investigate Trump-Russia collusion did not conform to the standards set in the special counsel law, which requires there be a formal, regular Department of Justice investigation. And when that investigation finds evidence of wrongdoing, then a special counsel gets appointed. Rod skipped that step. He simply said to Mueller, go on out and get Donald Trump. Second point is that technically there is no crime of collusion on the books. There is no law that makes collusion a crime. And of course, we all know if you want to talk about collusion, let's get back to that Uranium One deal. Now, according to this article over here in MSN, Mueller is still mulling a Trump campaign collusion with Russians. They're talking about a possible subpoena for a 2 to 3 hour grilling. And Trump's advisors are saying this would not be a good idea. Mueller clearly wants to try and anger and provoke Trump into making a statement that would open him up to a possible perjury charge. And so there may be a long, dragged-out lawsuit over this issue. They're talking about 4 dozen questions that they want to ask Donald Trump. Now, again, Mueller's talking about a subpoena over the Russia case. They're still pushing this. And I think Mueller's plan is to try and drag this out until just before the midterms and try and use Trump-Russia collusion. They're trying to keep that alive. It's on life support right now. And they're going to use it to try and tarnish all of the GOP. Because if you look at it honestly, the Democrats don't have anything to campaign on. This is what they're campaigning on. Trump hate and Trump-Russia collusion. It's all they've got to play with. Everybody's looking at all the cities that are dominated by liberal Democrats and seeing what terrible condition that they're in. As we reported yesterday, polls are showing that millennials are dropping support for the Democratic Party. Everybody sees the liberals as tainted by all this nonsense about non-gendered restrooms and 47 different gender types and all this other nonsense. They're getting turned off by it all. Anyway, we're going to take a break for station identification. We got a caller waiting on the line when we come back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. We're going to go to the phones here to Don in Iowa. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, as far as Rosenstein, whatever his name is, Rosenstein, they stonewalled. The Department of Justice stonewalls, and it's been proven that when the Congress, these congressional committees, they have the right to get information. They say, give us the documents. They have to give it to them. But they just wait. Now, it's been proven that if they start talking about a subpoena and not just talking about it, but actually saying, okay, we're going to subpoena you tomorrow, then all of a sudden this stuff appears. So what they're doing is they're who's extorting whom in this deal? The DOJ is extorting the Congress. The Congress should just immediately type up the subpoenas and give it to them right away. I mean, that's the only way they get these documents.
I absolutely agree with you. I just reposted a flashback article about how the State Department is saying it will take 75 years to properly compile all of the Clinton emails for investigators. I mean, that's utterly ridiculous, of course.
It's a lie. I mean, the congressmen are the ones that are just, what's the word? They're cowards, I guess. I mean, I don't know what they're afraid of exactly, but what do they have to lose by just subpoena? They have subpoena power. Why don't they have to lose by, telling these guys, showing these guys who's boss? They have nothing to lose.
Well, technically, it would be seen as a violation of the separation of powers doctrine. Again, I think the real issue is that there are a lot of people, not just in the Department of State, but in Congress itself, who really don't want any of this stuff to come on out. There are a few people who are trying to get at it, but they're facing an uphill battle.
Right. It's the guy, Mueller, another guy, nobody knows how to pronounce his name. It's Mueller, but everybody calls him Mueller. But when he first hit the scene here, and they were saying what they were trying to do is get Trump's base. They were trying to make Mueller look good to Trump's base, and they said they kept. I saw this on a lot of different blogs and stuff. They said people were saying, "Oh, how can you say he's a bad guy? He won such and such medals in Vietnam." Well, a lot of guys won medals in Vietnam, and they're in prison right now for murder, rape, and stuff like that. This guy that they just nabbed for Golden State Killer, the East Area Rapist, Golden State Killer, original Night Stopper, he was also a guy that won medals in Vietnam. It has nothing to do with what you're doing right now.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying there. Anyway, the whole system is irretrievably corrupt. And I have, for almost a quarter of a century now, been waiting for people inside the government to stand up and say, we're going in the wrong direction. We need to make some changes. If it hasn't happened by now, it's not going to happen. I think the truly decent, just people have literally been driven out of the government. Because once a government starts to go corrupt, it goes all the way corrupt. And I think that's where we are right now. And I think everybody in D.C. is afraid of the truth coming out about the Clinton Foundation. They're afraid of the truth coming out about what Hillary was really doing with her email server. And if she was running an espionage operation inside the Department of State, there are people inside the Department of State who are going to get caught up in that as well. And that's probably the reason the State Department is saying 75 years you have to wait to get the emails until after they're all retired and dead and gone. Because that tends to happen with the really big scandals. They just say, we're going to release all the documentation somewhere down the road, like with the Kennedy assassination, except they're still keeping some of that secret as well. And
I'm getting to where I'm just basically losing interest in the whole thing because I'm totally powerless. I have one vote. I can vote, and it's not going to make a hell of a lot of difference. I can go talk to my congressman, and but outside of that, I can call your show. But I mean, outside of that, I can't really do anything. So whatever they're going to do, they're going to go ahead and do. Okay,
unfortunately, you're right. I mean, because of the sham electoral system in this country, the American people have been totally disenfranchised. Our role is to provide wealth and new soldiers for the ruling elites, and they don't listen to us anymore. The wonderful government that was crafted by the founding fathers doesn't exist anymore, and our government is openly attacking our Bill of Rights. They're still after the Second Amendment. They've ignored the Fourth Amendment, and now they're trying to basically craft exceptions to the First Amendment. Okay, Don, are you there? I guess we lost Don. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And let's go over to Curtis in Nevada. Aloha, Curtis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I think now we're starting to hit into the nerve center of the deep state domestic. And from what I've listened to other shows, what they're talking about this is the SCS entrenched. And this SCS, they were created actually in 1978. And for some reason, there's like regulations in it. I don't know how that works. This is that they cannot be fired. They cannot be terminated. Once they're in, they can be moved around, which they are. That's why Comey's can be on some kind of with the USB or USB of that bank, and then now all of a sudden he's an FBI director, and they put him in positions where they're not even trained for. And you've got like 10,000 people right now that are part of SCS, and 9 out of 10 of them were appointed by Obama. See,
that's a lot.
That kind of remember, yeah, when Clinton fired those 500 government lawyers the first day he took office.
Yes, all the U.S. attorneys. Right.
I think that kind of was all the big setup, and that's why they're so entrenched and powerful. And these guys like Comey, they all feel like they're bulletproof. That's why that's why Trump is he can't just come out and say, okay, you're fired, let's do this. He can't do that. You got an entrenched system that's been there for so long. They're not worried about Trump or anybody else.
Well, I'm afraid you're right. Whether you call it SES or simply bureaucratic resistance, and even John F. Kennedy had to deal with that when he was president, when he tried to implement his executive order to change the CIA. And the bureaucracy simply sat there and said, no, not today.
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing that I don't understand is how can it be that a president cannot, but the regulations are that you can't fire these people. I think it was that Roar guy that they just moved him around.
Yes.
He's part of that. He's in SES. I mean, how can that be? Why can't, where is it that you can actually write this kind of legislation that can make you bulletproof? I don't understand that, but that's what we're up against.
Well, sometimes it's embedded in the unions. Government workers have their own unions. We have the same problem here in Hawaii. It's very hard to get a government job, but once you've got it, it's almost impossible to get fired. You have to really mess up to be fired. And yes, you'll get moved around a lot, and that's where the Peter Principle kicks in, where everybody gets promoted to their level of incompetence. And that's why things don't work so well, like our light rail system.
Yeah, all these guys that are involved in this are SCS, and the SCS is just the domestic version of the deep state. And you got like Serco, another company that was formed. They act like bagmen and enforcers for the crown. And this is all corporate stuff where they're involved with overseeing of contracts, major contracts. Everything's entwined, Mike. It's like, this is all infrastructures within infrastructures. And that's what the deep state is.
Well, the deep state spreads beyond SES. It's not just SES. I mean, it's the Clintons, it's their enablers, the people back in Arkansas, it's the people who were running the email server. They're all part of that inner system that enriches itself and protects itself. And SES is a big part of the problem, but it's not the entirety of it.
Right, yeah. Well, when people call in and they express disappointment and discouragement, they got to understand what we're up against, and you can't just walk away. We can't, because if other people who are pessimistic, they might get discouraged, and just because of that, we just have to keep the fight going. We can't just give up. That's all I can say. This is what we're up against.
Well, again, what I think is about to happen is I think the U.S. is going to ultimately lose these wars, and I think we're going to see a massive economic collapse. They had a bad day on the stock market again today, and I'm seeing this government is getting ready to fall, the way Rome fell or the Soviet Union fell, and that really is our best option out of the current mess. Is the government gets so corrupt that at some point the people just stop listening, they stop obeying orders, they stop paying taxes, and they say, this isn't working. The contract with America, which is that Constitution and the Bill of Rights, that contract has been voided, and we the people are under no obligation to a bunch of suits inside the Beltway of Washington, D.C., who are basically in it for themselves.
Well, I don't know. I don't think there's going to be a war anytime soon. I think Trump is going to skirt away from this one the way he did North Korea and Syria. But I do think that 5 years from now, if the deep state is in control, that's when Russia is going to say, okay, we know this. Russia knows it's not, they know it's deep state they're up against. And if deep state comes back and takes this country over, Russia will sooner or later come at the Western world.
I think the deep state is still as in control of this country as it ever was. Trump has been compromised. He's been corralled, collared, whatever you want to call it. He's too easily led around. He succumbs to flattery. And the wars are growing. It looks like Syria is heating up again. And it was only a few weeks ago Trump was saying he wanted to get out of there. Now his new ploy is, well, I want the Americans out of there, but I want regional forces to go in. The other Middle Eastern nations are all saying, no, we don't need to get into that mess. They're sick and tired of all of this war as anybody else is. And so that's where that is. But unfortunately, I do think there's going to be an escalation because the U.S. needs a war to try and rally the American people back to supporting the government, because the government understands the American people are very skeptical. They're mistrusting of the government. They're not supportive of the government. The poll numbers have never been lower in terms of approval of either Congress or the government as a whole. And we're looking at this economic hardship. And the government thinks the war is going to fix all that. That if they get into a major war, that we'll forget all about the crimes and the corruption, and we'll throw a snappy salute at the flag and fling our money and our babies onto the designated enemy's bayonets, because that's what worked back in big mistake number 1 and big mistake number 2. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008. They're playing the same script all over again. This time, though, I don't think it's going to work, because the American people understand that in this world war, it's the United States government that is the aggressor, that is the bad guy.
Yeah, you're right. There needs to be a war, but not for the U.S., but for the deep state. And I still think Trump is going to avoid that. But we do have a lot of problems, and if he can't defeat the deep state, that eventually they will come back. And if they do, Mike, they're gonna terminate us with prejudice, because it should have already, by their time plan, it should have happened already. And they're very annoyed at this, this little speed bump that they had to go through. So we have to hope that we prevail, because we won't have a chance to regroup.
I agree with you that we're down to the wire on this one, not because that we're going to be rounded up and executed, but because if they do get into this war and it goes nuclear, there's not going to be a whole heck of a lot left. And unfortunately, I disagree with you about Trump. He's totally on board the war agenda. Look how quickly he seized on Netanyahu's little presentation to declare that he was 100% right about Iran. And look how quickly he turned around on getting out of Syria. So I'm afraid that Trump is an illustration. No matter who we vote for, we get more taxes and more wars. And that's the reality. Anyway, Curtis, thank you for the phone call. I'm going to let you go. I got other callers waiting on the line. Laura in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
How can you talk against Israel? Those poor people over there, they can't even afford matzah for their elderly Holocaust survivors. They can't afford matzah. Have to have commercials on TV,
Yeah, I'm seeing that. There's been a lot of stinks over the years about all these charities that are collecting food for Holocaust survivors and stuff. They rake in millions of dollars, and those few remaining actual survivors of the German slave labor camps aren't getting anything from it. It's just another scam.
Right, for sure. Then I wanted to talk about Trump. I know everybody's frustrated. I think here's what we need to do. Here's my plan. People need to get to his rallies, and instead of chanting Nobel, which only feeds into his ego, start chanting no wars for Israel. If we could get the whole crowd, maybe he would listen then. And I thought, everybody chant no wars for Israel. Maybe he'd get the idea, because he's not listening to us. We have to figure out a way to make him listen.
Well, I imagine that at his rallies, that they're basically inviting people they know are supportive of Donald Trump, and that Trump is still playing the game that we saw, Hillary do back in 2016, where people are screened coming into the rallies so that there is no embarrassing comments being made. I think Trump pretty much knows the American people are fed up with war.
Last rally and got free email tickets. Nobody asked you if you're a supporter or what. I think you can get in there. If you get
if you can, that would be fine. It is amazing that Trump still seems to have so many diehard supporters when he has been such a disappointment. But I think that Trump is already well aware that the American people are tired of war in general, and they're very tired of wars on behalf of Israel. But Trump is owned. Sheldon Adelson bought him, and he has a family relationship with Netanyahu as well, on top of that. So, yeah, Trump, unfortunately, is a disappointment. I still think it would have been worse had Hillary won. Then there would be rounding ups and detention camps for the independent media. But
we wouldn't want Jezebel in, definitely. But the problem is the little horn, which is Israel in the Bible. I know you don't like the Bible. Israel has led us to be the beast system because we follow the little horn. And they have turned our country around into a parasitical oligarchy.
yeah,
And so they've got so much money they can buy people, buy churches, buy groups, you know. It's just hard for us to fight. The only thing I could think of was people chant "No wars for Israel" at the next rally. And maybe we could get this out on all the radio stations. We get some people doing that. Anyway, that's my idea. I'm just trying to think of a solution.
okay. Well, I think, given the long shot of getting to one of these rallies, I think it would be more profitable, if you will, if we just talk to each other in everyday life and just say, why are we fighting all these wars that benefit Israel? And of course, you're going to be called an anti-Semite and a Jew hater and everything else. But it is a legitimate question. Why are we still having all these wars after 18 years? Why is the U.S. and Israel always the aggressor? And why are we being lied to so much about all this stuff? Anyway, Laura, I need to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go right back to the phones here. Errol in the Netherlands, thank you for waiting so patiently. What is on your mind today?
On my mind is a very simple thing, as a fact, a judicial standpoint. Benjamin Netanyahu made a, well, how do you call it? A show.
Yes.
To show, yeah, he made a show to show how dangerous it is that Iran has nuclear weapons, while Israel has nuclear weapons. So, from a judicial standpoint, when you look at it, Iran is a member of the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Yes.
Israel is not. Israel is not. So, the bogus, I call it bogus, excrement bogus, that Benjamin Netanyahu makes on Iran, because Israel is not a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Iran is so. Who is who? Who is the dumbest thing? Yeah? When you speak about irony, how dumb can you be? Well, it is. You can read it on the internet. You can read it on Wikipedia. Israel is not in a non-proliferation treaty, while Iran is. So
Yes.
they make claims. It's unbelievable. And that's just what I wanted to say. They try to trick the world, but they failed. This time, they failed so massively. Hey, and CDs, compact discs. Come on, man. We are now on USB. Hey, thank you for taking my call, Mike.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your information.
And, the best of Claire.
I certainly will. She's doing a lot better. Unfortunately, talking about irony, I'm now the one who's messed up his back, so I'm having some trouble moving around here today. There is one other thing to remember, and that is that CD-ROMs, CDRs, don't last forever. And so the idea that Israel went into Iran, found this warehouse, and found a bunch of CDs with usable information on them is remote. All of this information goes back before 2003, and most of these CDR blank disks, they only hold data for about maybe 5 years. Now, obviously, the Aiea has servers with regular hard drives that are going to hold the data a lot longer than that. Again, it was all for show. That shelf full of binders and all the CDs glued to that board, that's show business. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Mike in Chicago, and I may have to take you through the next commercial break. What's on your mind?
Well, nothing much. I understand that the Federal Reserve had left interest rates zero today. I guess the market was expecting that, but I understood that we have full employment, and you would think with inflation, I believe, is at 2% according to their core inflation, which excludes fuel and food out of it. That they would, I don't know what they're waiting for. And then I was looking at a job board today. We were talking about jobs of full employment. I was looking at some of these jobs on a job board, and I'm looking at home health care, medical delivery driver, school bus driver, assembly worker, workplace clothes delivery, warehouse associate, warehouse workers. I mean, what kind of jobs are these? I mean, is this going to pay a mortgage?
No.
Is that going to pay 400? We've had 400 or 500% increase in inflation in food, and how are you going to pay a $9,000 deductible on health insurance?
You're not. I mean, the American people are being squeezed for every penny they've got because all the wealth is flowing, if not to Israel and Wall Street, it's going to the war machine.
Right. And, furthermore, just my opinion, I'm not by no means, I just like try out the street. But frankly, I don't think they're going to be able to raise interest rates because of this debt that we have.
Yes.
I mean, we have, I don't know if the world understands it. We have the world reserve currency. I think that's the only reason that we're able to even service or put on, more debt with, hundreds of trillions of dollars in unfunded liability. And people like me, I got another 10 years to go. I think you do too. I mean, before you would consider. Go ahead, carry me over to the break.
Yeah, Mike, just stay on the line. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Mike in Chicago about the Fed and interest rates. And I think one of the reasons that interest rates are not being pushed up, besides the fact that it makes all existing debt that much more costly, is that Wall Street and the stock market are being held up by inexpensive money. And the way it works is brokers will go on over to the Fed's discount window, and they'll borrow a huge bit of money, and they'll buy a bunch of stocks, which makes the stock price go up. And then the brokers will sell the stock, and they'll take the money back to the Fed with that little bit of interest payment or no interest payment and keep the rest as profit. The problem is if interest rates start to go up, that deal doesn't pencil out anymore. And every time there's talk about the interest rates going up, the stock market takes a hit. Now, it took a hit today, even though the Fed announced they were keeping the rates where they are.
That's right, Michael. Am I on here?
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay, that's correct. So I'm smelling in the, something's starting to smell stinky here. And, I don't know. I don't think they're able to raise these rates. It's kind of funny that, they left them unchanged. There was always a reaction. Yeah, it was positive. And then they took it down. And it seemed like multiple programs, took it down. It wasn't like anything fast. But the thing is, I think they're just playing games. These companies are buying back their own stocks with cheap money, which makes their earnings look better.
Yes.
It's what it's doing. It's feeding on itself. Let me leave you with one thing here before we go. I live in Illinois. I told you I'm from Chicago. I live in Illinois, and Illinois State owes me $35. I did my taxes. Okay, I still didn't get a check. All right, April 15th was what? Well, it's going to be a month ago pretty soon. But I mean, don't you think I should have gotten my $35 back from the state? And I'm sick of waiting for it. They owe it to me. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to claim 2 independency. So I'll just, write them a little check next year, whatever I owe them. So I don't even have to worry about it. But I think, well, they don't want to give me my money because they're broke, right?
That's happened before.
Just
That's happened before, even with the federal government, where people paid their taxes on time, and the government said we're not going to be able to issue the refund checks until much, much later in the year. They just didn't have it. I mean, everything about our economic system right now is a fraud. Wall Street is being rigged. As you pointed out, the interest rate calculation ignores food and fuel, which is where inflation shows up first. We all know that the employment numbers are a joke because people who have been unable to find jobs for longer than a few months are placed in a separate category, so they're not counted as jobless. And it's all cookbooks. And lies and fraud, and it's all being held together with spit and baling wire. And I think if the Fed were to raise interest rates at this point, the whole system would come apart.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is that you didn't mention is the participation. If you look at the labor participation rate, I mean, you're talking. I think it's 150 million people. I mean, that's a lot of that's not even counted. And part-time jobs are counted as full-time jobs, right?
Yes.
And now people have to have three part-time jobs in order to pay these bills that I just talked about. Just to pay for basic necessities, and all these numbers that are looking grandiose. Like everything's okay, everything's great. You know what I mean? The economy's doing great. Everything. We're producing nothing but debt, IOUs and debt, and it's starting to get scary. I'll tell you what.
It's been scary for a long time. It's been scary for a long time. And the message that we keep getting from corporate media and the federal government is the stock market is high, the economy is doing fine. If you're hungry or homeless, it's got to be your own fault. And it's basically just trying to keep the people from rising up and saying it's time for a change. I think Occupy Wall Street really scared the bankers, and now they're trying to propagandize us into saying, oh, it's all our own fault. But Claire and I are involved in a couple of food programs here locally, and we see these people face to face. It's not their fault. They didn't do anything to deserve this. It was done to them.
Right. Absolutely. And it only gets better from here. That's why we need. I'm thank God for your radio show. Maybe let's start talking about it. Let's start. Going to be coming. Anyway. All right. So thank you, Mike, for your time.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike. We're going to switch over to Dave in Missouri. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, Mike. Hope you're having a blessed day.
Thank you.
Beautiful out here in the country, except it is 91 degrees in Virginia right now, and today my air conditioner in my truck decided to go out. How great is that? First 90-degree day.
The crust, the nerve. Obviously didn't know who he's...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And besides that, I was stuck in 4 hours of traffic on I-95 trying to get through New York City. But anybody who's been through New York City knows that's just the way things are going to go.
Yes.
And we have got to have infrastructure spending. What happened? This is the most vital thing. I've got a couple of issues with a few things that I've heard. I agree with the last caller who said the Fed really can't raise interest rates right now because this is a house of cards. They know this thing is long overdue of coming down on their head. They don't want to exacerbate that or make it happen any quicker. So they're going to do everything they can to keep a lid on this little shell game that they've got going on for as long as possible, understanding that when the bottom goes out of it, everyone is coming after them. And, you said yesterday, I think it was yesterday, Goldman Sachs hit with another $110 billion or something, and nobody's going to jail, Mike. So, we don't have, and here's the really interesting thing to me. I travel the country all the time. I meet people from every state in the union. I've been through 20 states so far this week, and it's only Wednesday.
Yep.
we have some of the best-hearted people in the world. Americans are great people. It's a melting pot of every race. And, you know, if you smile at them, if you treat them like a human being, like you'd like to be treated, in almost every case, they respond in kind. So, yeah, there's some real jerks out there. But for the most part, the American people are just hearts of gold, overworked, lied to, run through the mill, lined up for slaughter, or, you know, like cows running off a cliff. Sure, but beautiful people contrasted by the most evil, tyrannical, demonic system. And so this is really what I called to tell you. Mike, I got word from inside, man. Nothing is going to happen. Their plot to isolate Trump to the point that he was afraid to come after them has worked. It just blows my mind that they're able to get by with that. You know, say, oh, I mean, it's like you get caught speeding and you say, no, sir, you were speeding for chasing me at 75 miles an hour. I want to make a citizen's arrest. That's what the Democrats do, and it works because all of the media is on their side. So this last year and a half of roasting Trump over absolute frivolous lies, frivolous because it was lies, not frivolous because of the charge. The charge the Democrats are guilty of. Very heinous, traitorous criminal actions, and they're going to skate because they put the shoe on the other foot, and the American people who just tune into CNN or whatever because they're more interested in getting back to the football game, they just buy the propaganda, Mike. Nothing is going to happen to Hillary or Obama or any of these treacherous criminals, and I just hate to see this plot work. It blows my mind.
Well, I agree with almost everything you said, except for the fact that more and more of the American people aren't tuning into CNN. You should see their ratings. They're coming on over to the independent media, and they're understanding that there is a serious problem surrounding the Clintons. But I agree, nothing's going to happen. And the reason I think that, again, everybody in power in Washington was tangled up with the Clinton Foundation, and everybody's afraid of, you know, it's more than blackmail. It's if it comes apart, everybody's going to get splashed. And if I'm correct about what Hillary was doing with that email server, that's a scandal that could bring the entire government down. So, you know, it's nice to see Goodblatt trying to kick up some investigations, but he is fighting against an entrenched bureaucracy that wants to hang on to their jobs and their positions and their wealth because they're all able to basically hang on to their jobs.
Well, you know, if anybody actually still believes that the Clintons will ever see justice, all you need to realize is that now, a year and a half later, we only have one independent counsel, and he's still trying to find Russian collusion or a porn star or whatever he's on to next. But there is no one on their trail with all that mountain of evidence. Nobody on their trail. Everybody, so many great patriots have stood up to try to do, and that's why it's discouraging, Mike, because we don't want to teach our kids corruption wins. Just lay down. What are you fighting for? The money's going to buy the outcome. We don't want to teach our kids that, but Mike, it's the reality. And so,
I don't want our kids to live in a world that's like that. You know, and that's,
I don't either. That's what I call to tell you. I don't want to be the one to say it, but Mike, it's time to throw in the towel and give up, brother, because we are beat.
I disagree with you on that.
Nothing is going to happen.
I'm not giving up. I'm not throwing in the towel.
I respect you. I respect you, and because of that, and I won't either. But we're not going to accomplish anything. It's a dead deal, and so we're fooling ourselves.
I disagree.
Actually, by thinking we're making a difference.
We're educating the public, and one thing that we have accomplished is we've removed the government and corporate media's ability to lie to the American people with impunity. We have a very skeptical American people right now,
well,
of course,
are. But you said with impunity. I mean, what punitive damages? I mean, what penalties have any of these liars ever faced unless they get caught red-handed, like what's his name, who claimed to be there. They were shooting overhead or whatever. I forget that NBC dude. He might have lost his job for 30 minutes or whatever. But the criminals skate in this country. There is no penalty. Otherwise, we would see all of Wall Street behind bars, and Hillary would have been swinging 2 decades ago. But it's just not going to happen. And so, yes, I salute you for doing what you do. But, the reality is, and I hate to be the one to say it, I'm a fighter. I just don't. Walmart parking lot's full. People are poor. How am I supposed to believe we're ever going to achieve an economic revolution in this country that benefits the working people when everybody's carrying their money to buy made in China from these billionaires who purchased your politics and turned them all against you? It just blows my mind.
I'll grant you the system is totally corrupt, which is why I keep saying our best option is to wait for it to fall apart. And as you yourself admitted, our economy is a house of cards. It's ready to come apart. And it will bring the government down with it, because we, the American people, are going to look at the devastation and say the government is to blame. And the government will have to...
Which is why they have to do cashless. That's why they have to do cashless now before it happens. Their only hope of keeping control of the levers of power is to get cash out of everybody's hands before the dollar collapses. Put us all on a chip, put us all on a card, keep all the money in their criminally controlled organizations. They can prop it up longer. So that's the next big push that has to happen for their physical survival, is that they have to get rid of cash in the short term, because when the dollar collapses and the run starts, they're all dead. So how do you diffuse that? First, you make everybody a slave to your chip, to the little card, to whatever. And that's going to be the next thing come down the road, because it's a matter of necessity for their physical survival. That's what they have to do now. Since we're this far down the road, the only thing left is to get rid of cash. Then whatever happens, it can be manipulated. The news is always manipulated, but they've got to get the cash out of people's pockets, because when that cash becomes useless, they're all going to swing. And so the only way to do anything about that is to get rid of cash. So that's really the fight that's coming soon that I see. And and it's a matter of their necessity again, or they have to do it.
Well, I'll tell you, the implementation of that cashless society is in trouble, because once again, I was at the Safeway market just a day or two ago, and once again, the system was down, and only people with cash were able to walk out of there with their groceries. Anyway, listen, Dave, I need to let you go. I give you a lot of time on the air here.
God bless your audience. Please support RBN, folks. Peace out, brother.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to start with Al in Canada, and Al, I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I like your last caller. Up here in Canada, we have our central banker, Stephen Pelosi, head of the Bank of Canada. He's a figurehead, as you know. Pelosi's Canadian household debt of $2 trillion demands cautious approach on rate hikes. That just reinforces everything that's been said on your show for the last half hour.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we've been charting the debt trap U.S. economy for a very long time, and ultimately the fault lies with that Congress and President Wilson, who enacted the Federal Reserve Act, because by design, private central banks create more debt than money with which to pay the debt. And it doesn't matter where the debt is, whether it's corporate debt or on your credit cards, the debt grows and grows and grows. And it may get moved around, but it never goes away.
No, it doesn't. It's the corks and the rowboat or whatever, or in the dam, whatever. The holes in the dam when so many fingers and only a couple, So, in the United States, you have these things called unfunded liabilities because you don't have health care and all that stuff. You've also got a pension problem, right?
Yes.
That's looming.
Social Security's broke.
Oh, geez.
Okay, Al.
And to top it all off.
Al.
Yes.
Al, got to put you on hold. Got to do a commercial break.
Sure.
I'll come right back to you. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Al in Canada. We're talking about the Canadian economy. We're talking about the problem with debt. And of course, I remember not too long ago there was a big stink over the fact that Canada's central bank is actually owned by Canada. And as part of their charter, they were to provide interest-free loans for infrastructure development. But the Canadian government, a while back, stopped taking advantage of that and started borrowing at interest from regular banks and sticking the Canadian taxpayers with those interest payments.
Yeah, exactly. Mike, I want to read something for you right now. It's going to be really quick, and this is a quote. What is essential for everyone to understand is that banking is not a science. It's a religion. It's based upon belief. It has no basis in science whatsoever. And that's the prologue to your website.
Yeah, that's today's thought of the day.
I should have said unquote when I finished the first sentence, but it's true.
It is. It's a religion. It's a bunch of beliefs.
People actually believe this crap.
Yeah. Anyway, anything else?
Here's what's worse. Yeah. What's even worse is keeping these inflation rates artificially lower for even longer develops even more debt. In other words, more loans, more money creation. The velocity of money, in fact, is actually starting to decrease. But at the same time, inflation's going up. This is not a good thing.
No.
This is not a good thing at all. Anyways, and you know why. I'll let you go. So thanks a lot for your time, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot there. And the U.S. government first quarter borrowing set a new all-time record. They can't control it. They're borrowing like crazy and spending it on war. And they're bankrupting the nation in the process, which is exactly what led to the downfall of the Soviet Union, is they overspent on their military, neglected their people, and the Soviet Union fell. And that's why I think the same thing is bound to happen here. Okay, well, Donald Trump has now been formally nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. And I'm wondering what they're trying to get in exchange for it. And I think it's as obscene as Obama getting the Nobel Peace Prize, because Trump is not a peace president. Yes, he's a war president. I think credit for the stand-down intentions in the Koreas goes to Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un, and not Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is certainly not working for peace in Syria, or Iraq, or Afghanistan, or Libya, or Yemen, and now, of course, Iran is in the gun sights. So it's a joke to even consider giving him the Nobel Peace Prize. Okay, article coming out of Sputnik News. No Trump-Russia collusion, how Soros-Clinton effort to dethrone Donald failed. And basically starts with a reminder. The House Intelligence Committee did not find any evidence of collusion between Donald Trump and Russia. And that was their official conclusion. There's nothing there. There's absolutely nothing there. But still, Hillaryites and the DNC are trying to push this story because it's the only card they've got to play going into the midterm elections. Because they don't really have a platform that speaks to ordinary voters. It's all pandering to Black Lives Matter and LGBT and snowflakes. And that base is starting to dwindle. Okay, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with our third hour and our third hour guest after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And we're still trying to get in touch with our third hour guest. So let me get some more news in here while we're waiting for that. Now, the other day we reported on how the Democratic Party had purchased Hillary Clinton's email and voter data list for basically about $1.5 million. And now the Democrats are saying that Hillary really ought to donate that money back to the Democratic Party. She should just make it a gift for its use. The DNC has been left broke by the last, well, Hillary's campaign and Obama's second campaign. All I can say on that one is good luck on that one. Hillary does not let money go easily. Meanwhile, and a good example of that came on out from this Washington State story where there was a donor to a Hillary Clinton nonprofit group. Onward Together is the group. It's a political action organization Hillary Clinton formed after she lost the 2016 election. And he wanted to cancel his regular monthly donation because the group disclosed very little information on how the money was being spent. And he went back to the website and discovered that nowhere in the website was there an option to discontinue your donations. Once you committed to the monthly payment, there's no way to cancel it. And so this Seattle man, Corey Kosielniak, I think that's how it's pronounced, has taken a complaint to the Washington State Attorney General's office. So you got to be careful when you look at a politician's website and make sure that you can get out of whatever it is they're trying to talk you into. Now, as you know, Elizabeth Warren has been the focus of a lot of controversy over claims that her genetic heritage includes Native American, part Cherokee. And apparently this goes back to 1980s. When she entered this in a job database for law professors, and it actually helped her to get a job, to claim that heritage. Well, now Native Americans are demanding that she prove that she actually is Cherokee. One of her opponents has put up billboards. He's an Asian Indian, and he's out there saying, you know, I'm a real Indian, and Elizabeth Warren is not. And Warren is refusing to take a DNA test. And that right there to me gives it away. She was lying all the time. Now there's a new player in there, Debbie White Dove Porrico, and she's an actual descendant of the 17th century Powhatan princess Pocahontas. We've all heard that name before. And she's now out there challenging Senator Elizabeth Warren to take a DNA test and prove her claimed Native American ancestry. And she says if it turns out Warren does have Native American ancestry, Debbie White Dove Porrico will be the first to welcome her to the heritage. But the fact that Warren has not done something so simple as do a DNA test tells us that, yeah, we find out these people lie a lot. Barack Obama lied about being a foreign student when he was in college to get additional financial aid and special perks. So, once a liar, all a liar, I guess. Now, down in Texas, there's been a victory for common sense. The Texas Appeal Court has ruled that Texas can impose a voter ID requirement for the coming elections. And I hope that starts a movement in the other states, because remember, all during 2016, Hillary's lawyers, the DNC lawyers, were going to state after state after state, trying to find a judge who would declare the state's voter ID laws as unconstitutional or racist or some other such nonsense. And we know that millions of illegal immigrants voted in the 2016 elections, and unless there is a voter ID requirement, they will vote again in the November elections. So, finally, some common sense out there. And it's not racist to want to see an ID. You have to have an ID to drive a car. All races get driver's IDs. It's a ridiculous argument. All right, we're finally being joined now by Alfonso E. Chavez. Welcome to the show, Alfonso.
Mike, thank you for having me, and congratulations to you and Claire for an outstanding show.
Well, thank you very much. And you wrote me a letter a few days ago in which you told me a story. First of all, your parents are from Mexico. You are a legal U.S. citizen. And you had an interesting story about an experience your father went through. So why don't you just start at the beginning and just tell us all what happened?
Thank you, Mike. I'd like to share this story for a variety of reasons, but most importantly because of the recent events that we're witnessing transpire in Washington, D.C. And I would like to speak for a small group of people who have had the experience of dealing with something of this magnitude, specifically coming from the FBI and the DOJ, which very few people have experience with. And I figured it was time to write about this, more so because it had happened to us 12 years ago. So I want to be very clear. When I was 34 years old, my father was secretly embroiled in a secret claim against him brought to the FBI and the DOJ by what would be considered a whistleblower. So in ordinary speak, and just to give everyone a historical context, in 1863, Abraham Lincoln borrowed some laws from England that are called the Keatem Laws, and they're now known by historians as the Lincoln Laws. Later on in the 70s and in the 80s, they became what's now known as the False Claim Act. Nevertheless, these laws have been on the books since 1863, and they were enacted in an attempt by Lincoln to go after people that were selling him bad donkeys or bad munitions or any other article that was being used by the Union at that time to support the war. Mm-hmm. And essentially what Lincoln did, to the detriment of all of us today, is that he deputized every single attorney to sue anyone for any reason at any time in the name of the king as for himself. I'm going to say this again very slowly. The Keatem Laws that were brought by Abraham Lincoln to this country, that were on the books, state, and I quote, Keatem pro domino regiquam pro se ipso in hoc parte sequitur, meaning, he who sues in this matter for the king as well as for himself. This was an abomination, a legal and constitutional abomination for a sitting president to deputize every single lawyer and give them the power of the federal government to sue anyone at any time for any reason. Now, lo and behold, my father, a physician, came to this country legally with my mother, married, had 3 children. I was born in Minnesota. We moved to Chicago. We moved to Houston. He finished his medical specialization at Baylor. We ended up in El Paso, Texas. At the age of 62, he started his medical practice at the age of 34. Imagine how many years of schooling he had to go through to be able to start his practice at 34. Now at the age of 61, almost 62, someone decides to accuse him of Medicare fraud. Secretly. There's no knock on the door. There's no phone call. There isn't someone sending us an email saying, hey, we think someone did something wrong here. We need to investigate. We need to look at this. It's not the way these people work. And at this time, lo and behold, Robert Mueller was the director of the FBI. This was Mueller's FBI. This was 2006. So this case starts, and it lasted for 2,136 days. I'll translate that. 5.85 years. 52,000 hours. 305 weeks. I can give you the math and we can break it down. I don't think anyone understands how incredibly vexatious and repressive the FBI and the DOJ are, and how incredibly difficult it is to be able to withstand that kind of action against you. And when I was watching this entire circus unfold with Donald Trump and what they were doing to go against him with the appointment of the special counsel, all of this flooded back to this experience that we had 12 years ago. And nothing has changed, Mike. Nothing has changed. Yes? And with regard to all of this, you have to think, who can withstand any of this? And so I want to make a couple quick points. Right? There's a legal jurisprudence notion called animus nascendi. This is a term coming from Latin that essentially means animus, mind, nascendi, to harm, right?
Yes.
There has to be some form of intent to harm in the minds of the FBI or the DOJ to go after anyone, a normal citizen, whether it be a doctor, whether it be a nurse, a school teacher, whether it be the President of the United States, whether it be a radio host. It doesn't matter. Very few people can withstand the entire full frontal force of the FBI and DOJ going after you. We happen to be one of the families, one of the few families that survived. Not only did we survive it, I'm perhaps one of the few guys in the U.S. that has beaten Robert Mueller at his game. And how we did that is a complicated and very interesting story in and of itself. But for today's purposes, I wanted to point out to your viewers and to your listeners some very simple points. And I'll make one right now in a very simple way. The Vice President of the United States makes $243,500 a year. After 24% taxes, that's about $59,000. He's left with $185,000 left in his salary. At the legal rates right now, if the entire weight of the Mueller investigation were against Mike Pence, that would mean that at an hourly rate of $1,500 an hour for one lawyer, Mike Pence could afford, on 1 year vice presidential salary, 123 hours of legal counsel. That's 15 days of legal service. And he's the Vice President of the United States. What do you think would have happened if anyone else would have won the presidency that wasn't a billionaire, that didn't have almost unlimited resources to be able to defend himself against a false accusation like we did? No one came to our defense. None of the insurance companies covered my father's defense. Not even the companies or the billionaire companies that were involved or entrenched in the case as well. The entire weight of his defense and our family defense rested on our family's ability to be able to defend ourselves. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Does that not sound like the Second Amendment issue of having to defend yourself against tyranny? Now, how many people, including the Vice President of the United States, could afford to be able to go against Mueller with only 15 days of money to do it? It's unbelievable. Complete violation of our Sixth Amendment, which is part of our Constitution, which essentially breaks down our right to a speedy trial. Absolute violation of our 14th Amendment, which is a due process issue, let alone, a handful of others as well. And so as we discuss this topic and we have this conversation as a nation and as people, I think that we need to be incredibly sensitive to not only the issues that we have in the healthcare arena with regard to having to nationalize healthcare. Who can afford to get cancer? Who can afford to weather one cancer in a family, let alone 2 or 3 or 4? Who can afford to be accused falsely of anything? What happened to the civility afforded to us by our founders in reference to giving us the ability to due process? I would tell you as of today, yes? And this again is probably going to shock many of your viewers, right? Even though the FBI interceded on behalf of a whistleblower, which was based on entirely false claims, the FBI and the DOJ withdrew from our case 444 days after it was brought before a secret filing in a federal court. In other words, 444 days after the case was filed in federal court secretly, the FBI and the DOJ basically went off to the sideline. That didn't mean they withdrew, but the government did not actively participate in the case. This is in the case file. If anyone wanted to see it, it's public record. They could find the case and they can read it for themselves. But that doesn't mean they stopped. The prosecutors that had been deputized, yes, Mr. Dumb and Mr. Dumber, a law firm out of El Paso, Texas, and another one out of Las Cruces, New Mexico, yes, thought that they were going to win the lottery. Why? Because they get 30% of the pie, Mike. 30% of the pie. How many people would like 30% of, in our case, $303 million? And to make matters more interesting, if anyone remembers the Aaron Brockovich case, that case settled for $333 million. At the time this case was brought forward against a Mexican physician working in El Paso who had spent his entire life serving the public and, in fact, was owed money by Medicare when all was said and done, right? Did the FBI ever step in to say, hey, you know what? Something went wrong here. We're now going to protect your father. We're going to go against these lawyers who try to hoodwink us. We're going to go against this whistleblower who fabricated these claims. We're going to go against the people that have lied to us. Absolutely not. And does that sound familiar?
Yep.
Has anyone done anything to go after Bernie Madoff's people? Yes, or anyone else? And I think we've asked this question on other shows as well. I think you brought this up too. When in the history of the United States has anyone, any criminal actor's lawyer's office been raided? Was Al Capone's lawyer's office raided? Was John Gotti's lawyer's office raided? Was Bernie Madoff's lawyer's office raided? Never. Were any of these lawyers who attacked my father for the incredulous reason of getting rich, right, to make 30% off the purse in the hope that my father and the medical companies that they dragged into this would settle the case, right? Did any of these people get their offices raided? No. Even after it was discovered in our case, which was historic, what made this case historic was that in the 148 years of federal court, specifically relating to these kinds of trials, which are called Ketam trials, never had a jury of 12 people found a defendant not guilty in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. That was one of the reasons the lawyers appealed that case after losing it to the Fifth Circuit in Louisiana. So not only did we have to spend a massive amount of time and money getting a full-on not guilty verdict in a federal court in Texas, we had to then go and defend ourselves in the appellate court in the Fifth Circuit in Louisiana for another 3 years, lasting a total of 2,136 days. So I ask everyone, how much longer could anyone deal with a guy like Mueller on their back? How long is this going to last? 4 years? 5 years? 8 years? And is this the way we're going to operate? There's got to be a better way of dealing with this. And this was the conversation I wanted to start. Because we cannot have a country that weaponizes the FBI and DOJ to act in criminal manners. It's not possible. And again, it breaks my heart that this happened to us. And it breaks my heart that this is happening across this country to a bunch of other people as well. We're not the only family, right? Where was CNN? Do you think CNN cared to come down to El Paso, Texas and talk to my father? Do you think the New York Times or the Washington Post or anyone cared to interview us? In fact, we reached out to them. We reached out to them.
Alfonso, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we have to take a commercial break, and it's going to be 3 minutes long, and I'll come right back to you as soon as the commercials are over. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're still talking with Alfonso Y. Chavez, who's just painted this nightmare scenario of the weaponization of the FBI and the Department of Justice, and also the legal system, by literally offering bounties to lawyers to go on out and sue people. It's like the witch hunts in Europe. The professional witch hunters were paid a portion of the accused and condemned witches' property. And so, of course, they saw witches everywhere, which sort of gets me to my next point I want to make. My understanding is that the final audit of the Medicare documentation from your father's practice showed that he was actually owed money by Medicare, that he hadn't defrauded them, and yet these lawyers still went ahead trying to prosecute the case to try and get all of the defendants to agree to an out-of-court settlement. Thank goodness that your father decided he was going to, fight for his integrity and his honor. But then to try and take it to an appeals court again, very obviously these lawyers were motivated by the money and nothing else. And I think there should have been complaints to the State Bar Association. Not that the State Bar Associations ever do anything to lawyers. We went through that with the lawyer that handled my mother's estate years ago, and he literally tried to steal the house. And we filed a complaint with the Bar Association. He got a wrist slap, and that was that. But it's important to understand. There's even a term for it now. It's called lawfare. And that's where you sick your lawyers on each other to try and bankrupt the other party. It's almost like lawyers have become the modern-day equivalent of the hired gunfighter.
Exactly, Mike. And I've had extensive interactions with different bar associations. In fact, I've been living in California for now 18 years, and I hope that the rest of the country that's hearing this knows that there still is hope in California. There are several of us here that are fighting for the rule of law and to keep our sanity. Very often I hear a wonderful caller by the name of Peter call in to make some incredible points. And so there are several of us that are here fighting. I know that it might seem to the Midwest that California is lost. We're not lost just yet, but things are very difficult here. To that point, I want to reference you to Senator Joe Dunn. Senator Joe Dunn of California is in fact a whistleblower against the California bar. There's a very famous case. In fact, his lawyer was Mark Garagos. I spoke to Joe Dunn. He was active in parts of my case, and other cases I've had here in California. But nevertheless, I would invite you guys to Google him and to see what he was trying to do to try to expose the corruption of the California bar. And I will absolutely agree 100% that the majority of the bar associations are paratoids. They're malignant tumors gone bad. And so when you look at the conspiracy, and there's a RICO argument to be made in the conspiracy between the DOJ and everyone else. Yes, a very interesting point that I would like to make is this, and I invite everyone to go to the FBI website. And on their FAQ on their website today reads the following. What authority do FBI agents have to make arrests in the United States, its territories, or on foreign soil? Answer. In the U.S. and its territories, FBI special agents may make arrests for any federal offense committed in their presence or when they have reasonable grounds to believe that the person to be arrested has committed or is committing a felony violation of U.S. laws. Now, I want that to sink in for a second. That means that given the rules today, any FBI agent can act on his or her own volition to arrest anyone at any time, given a suspicion of a crime or the grounds that they believe that the person to be arrested has committed or is committing a felony of a U.S. law. Where in the hell are these 30,000 agents that we have working for us today, and why in the hell are they not going out and arresting their own kind? The same people that are hiding the criminalities of the people that we elected to serve us. If it were up to me, I would argue that there should be about 1,500 agents in Washington alone who should have walked into the 7th floor building of the FBI headquarters and arrested half of those clowns on their own volition. They have the right to do it. They don't need to get permission from anyone. They're not a military agency where they have to take orders from a general. They have special powers. That's why they're called special agents. Now, if anyone disagrees with this, then maybe we need to review the FAQ on the FBI. Maybe they made a mistake, right? Maybe they don't have that authority. But from what I'm reading in black and white, and what I've known since 2006, is that they do. This was the problem that I had with agents in El Paso, Texas. I kept saying, why are you not going after the bad guys? You have the authority to do it. And they would just wash their hands and walk away.
Yes.
This is the fundamental crux of the issue, right? for whatever reason, everyone thinks that they need to be given an order from God knows where to be able to do their job. Imagine if police officers in every single state had to wait to get an order to give you a speeding ticket. Where would we be?
Okay, Alfonso, we got to take another break for commercials. They're kind of oddly spaced on out. We'll be back in 4 minutes and continue with your story. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Alfonso Y Chavez. He's been telling us this horror story of what appears to have been a purely profit-driven prosecution of his father. We know that the real nature of the FBI is not what we see on TV and movies. That's all carefully crafted to give you a public image that the FBI are the good guys. And that was something that J. Edgar Hoover obsessed about when he was in charge of the FBI. There was even a movie made called The FBI Story starring Jimmy Stewart. And you can forget about the director's name in the credits because Hoover was actually on the soundstage every day telling the director how to make the FBI look as good as possible. He even appears briefly in the movie, but only from the backside. We all know from COINTELPRO, that scandal back in the 60s was exposed in the 70s. We all know what the real nature of the FBI is. They're the American equivalent of the Gestapo. They are there to enforce the desires of the rulers, and they're not really all about law enforcement at all. They're about covering up. They're about framing people. They're about blacklisting, people out of Hollywood over Vince Foster and that kind of a situation. So to most of our listeners, your story is not going to be that much of a surprise. But I think anybody who would be honestly thinking about trying to arrest one of these untouchable, corrupt players is going to have to realize what happened to Seth Rich, and that may be cooling their enthusiasm.
Absolutely, Mike, and we're living in dangerous times. I mean, clearly, it took us a long time to get over the naivety that we had just in reference to thinking that the FBI and that the government was really there to protect us. I mean, my parents came to this country with a grandiose ideal of American jurisprudence, and I think that to a certain degree, most people in the world would envision or feel that the U.S. Judicial system is perhaps one of the most advanced or fairest in the world, when in fact it isn't. And it's a shock to the system. It's almost like discovering that Santa Claus doesn't exist when you're a kid, right? You feel that the government is here to protect you and to protect the weakest of you or the weakest of us, which is essentially the tenet of the Constitution, right? You would think that the weakest among us is the person that most needs protection. Yes, which is why, to a certain degree, our judicial system is comprised of jurors, or should be, right?
Yes.
With the exception of family courts, and don't get me started with that, right? Yeah, they've strategically removed the jury component that was afforded through the Constitution, specifically due process.
Well, they're starting to do that in a lot of situations where if the value involved in a crime involving theft is below a certain level, they won't get you a jury trial. And that's a very, very dangerous trend because those jurors are the highest authority in the judicial system. They're there to guard against malicious, profit-driven prosecutors, as you had in your case, or corrupt judges, or judges who are trying to enforce bad law. That's what the jurors are there for. They're the final check and balance. And if we start losing those, then it really does become a kangaroo court and a dictatorship.
And in California, I don't know if anyone is aware of this, but in California specifically, the Los Angeles Superior Court, which is one of the largest court systems in the world, the LA Superior Court, which is in downtown LA, has a yearly budget, Mike, of $2 billion. $2 billion.
Wow.
And they're bankrupt. You cannot get a court transcriptionist unless you pay for it. Let me say that again. They don't have court transcriptionists in court anymore, unless you can afford one and you order one before your hearing or trial. How many people do you think go through the system a day? And based on the statistics I was given, in the Los Angeles Superior Court alone, there are approximately 100,000 cases filed a day. This is the court of Michael Jackson, Kim Kardashian, the McCourts, everyone else in LA that gets processed for whatever reason, yes, they go to the LA Superior Court in downtown LA. How many people, Mike, do you think can afford to pay a court transcriptionist or even know what that is? So imagine you don't have a jury, now you don't have a court transcriptionist, and you're at the mercy of a judge. It is unbelievable. And here we have the FBI that is supposed to deal with these kinds of issues. Don't you think that the FBI should be able to come in and say, hey, Mr. Court System, what's wrong with your finances? How could you be bankrupt? You're the seventh, California is the seventh largest economy in the world, perhaps the eighth, and you can't afford court transcriptionists? So essentially, when you think about it, very similar to the healthcare phenomena where no one has the right to get sick anymore because you can't afford to get sick.
Yes.
You can't afford to have a legal issue. And this is the crisis that we're living in. And so part of my inspiration, on top of the fact that I love what you guys are doing, and you're doing phenomenal work day in and day out, to much sacrifice, because I know that you're not, you guys are struggling.
Yes.
And we should all find the opportunity to help programs like yours and independent journalists and advocates like yours who love this country. We all love this country. I love this country. I have 3 kids who love this country. But I'm horrified at the day one of my children either gets sick or has a legal issue, because either of those circumstances will potentially kill them. It is unfathomable to think that any of us can support or have to be able to fight against those kinds of demonic situations. It's just not possible.
Well, medical bills are the leading cause of personal bankruptcies in the United States right now. We have the most expensive medical care in the world. It's something like 33rd or 34th in quality, and it's all about pushing product. And it's a totally corrupted system. It's all about the money.
It is. Food for thought. Who remembers in 1993 when Bill Clinton asked over 90 attorney generals to resign? And I guess we can remind the audience that Reagan did something similar. Do you think Bill Clinton, what would have happened to Trump or any president today had he asked 90 attorney generals to resign?
Well,
it's
at the time, it was basically predicated that, Clinton did have the right to fire them all and appoint new ones. But in hindsight, it was clearly a case of wanting control over the state's attorneys generals in order to forestall certain investigations and prosecutions.
Exactly. And then everyone I'm assuming saw the movie American Made with Tom Cruise and can get a better idea as to what was going on.
Yes.
In those Clinton days. But the moral of the story here is this: in any of these scenarios, right, the first line of defense and the last line of defense are the agencies that are there to protect the people, right? When I grew up idealizing the FBI, right? Mm-hmm. They could do no wrong, right? My parents were oblivious, perhaps maybe even naive to the fact that they thought that the Justice Department and that the FBI knew. When this entire thing happened, and I guess this is a very important point, I don't want it to get missed. All of the billing in 2006 that at least we were doing in the office, about 90% of it was electronic billing. We were sending bills electronically to Medicare and Medicaid.
Yes.
And so at that point in time, when this happened, we thought, okay, there's a misunderstanding, right? I don't know, maybe someone, a file got corrupted, something got lost along the way, someone, messed up a digit here or there. We'll figure it out, right? We were still optimistic in the sense of looking at this as perhaps just a big miscommunication or some misinformation. Once we started digging into it, and we started expecting the FBI to know the truth, we just kept waiting. We kept waiting and waiting and waiting, thinking that one day they were going to knock on our door and say, okay, we figured it out, right? Now we know the truth because we have all of the electronic medical records. Mike, the FBI raided the clinics. They didn't come in and knock on the door. They raided the clinics just like they raided Manafort's home and office, just like they raided Cohen's office. They raided with guns drawn, with battering rams, right? Dogs, the whole thing. This was not a friendly, exchange of civility, right?
Yep.
It was brutal. Now, even after having had that experience, we said, okay, they're following protocol, they're FBI agents, they're on the lower end of the totem pole. Maybe they don't know what they're doing. Maybe they're 1, 2, 3 years into the field, whatever, right? But as we kept looking at this issue, we realized that it was systemic. The corruption was systemic.
Yes.
And whether they knew or they didn't know, they were not moving a finger to help anyone. In fact, all of their energy and effort was going to support a false claim against an innocent man. And that is the tragedy here that goes unbeknownst to anyone. What's going to happen if Trump is found not guilty? What if Trump wins this whole thing? What's going to happen? What is his recourse? What's going to happen to Mueller? Is he going to get to go to jail? Is Rosenstein get to go to jail? What about Sessions? Yes, who is going to be held accountable for having dragged him through the mud just like they dragged us through the mud? And at the end of the day, who is going to make reparations to indemnify the President of the United States for this big waste of time and money and effort? Yes, what about the countless other families that have been dragged through the mud for the same reason with no accountability? Not even a "we're sorry." Not even, and let me be clear, not even a public "we're sorry." No one from the DOJ went on the podium or a stand or on television to say, we're exonerating Dr. Chavez, or we're exonerating the Chavez family, or God knows how many other people, right? There wasn't an apology letter. Nothing. Zero. And to make matters clear to everyone, zero financial indemnification. Not one penny came back, even after the courts in Louisiana, the Fifth Circuit, held the verdict. And this was the most shocking part of it. When we discovered in court, in trial, during the federal trial, when they discovered that the whistleblower had in fact committed perjury through the attorneys in what was defined as sublimation of perjury. So let me translate that. Sublimation of perjury is when the lawyers tell the witness to lie or instruct the witness to change his or her testimony to make their case better in court. Had that not come out on the bench while the witness was being interrogated by opposing counsel, this case, God knows where we would have ended up in this case. That was the tipping point when one of the attorneys, and there were about 20 of them in the room, yes, not all representing my father. My father had about 4 attorneys of the 20, yes, but of the attorneys that were there, one of them was lucky enough to get the witness to admit that she had falsified her testimony. And at that point, when they counter-examined her, and they said, "Who told you to change your testimony in your dicta?" she admitted that her lawyer had told her. And at that point, the judge threw the gavel down, kicked everyone out of the courtroom, took everyone into chambers, and the next day, everything changed. But that was a Hail Mary moment. It was a miraculous moment that happens rarely in the history of court trials, where you get a witness on the stand to be dumb enough to say, "Hey, my lawyer told me to lie to make the case look better." Right?
Oh, okay, Alfonso, I need to interrupt here a little bit. We've got a caller on the line who wants to ask you a question. So let's bring Chris from Tampa in on the discussion. Chris, you have a comment or question for Alfonso?
On the importance of court reporters, pardon me, I'm just trying to understand what the importance is myself, and if you could expand on what I understand is that it makes the court a court of record and makes certain issues that are brought up verbally appealable. That's why it's important to put things in writing if possible. If you can't afford a stenographer, a court reporter. And I found recently that in a civil case that most court reporters won't work for individuals. They'll only work for attorneys. I even called up one that would work for me as an individual and gave them the information that of the court date. And then I received an invoice emailed to me, so I had to deny that because I told them I didn't choose you yet. wasn't interested in your services yet, and the case actually was canceled. The hearing was actually canceled. Now, stenographers can't understand every word. Their vocabulary isn't omniscient. Their transcriptions are flawed, and we should be allowed to record. In Florida here, we have the Sunshine Law, where all public officials, in the course of their public duties, are allowed to be recorded, even if they're not informed they're being recorded. But, of course, the courts are an exception. So why can't we record and make our own transcripts? Court reporters, I've found in many cases, omit vital parts of transcripts, which makes it obvious that their omissions are deliberate. So I just wanted you to expand on that. If you had any more to add, please.
Sure, I completely agree. I've been involved in a myriad of cases where court reporters have doctored or changed the dicta of the judge to favor the judge. Very often judges will misspeak or they'll say things that are inappropriate or perhaps maybe even illegal. And the court reporters will change it because it's within their best interest to serve the court, right? They don't want to get fired from their job, and they have an interest in maintaining a copious record to please the court, in other words, the judge. I've had many issues with that. And I completely agree with you. I think that it should be our right, de facto, across the country, all 50 states, for all of us to be able to record. In federal court, however, it is an abomination. You can't even walk in with a cell phone. In fact, you can't even walk in with a camera in most cases. And I'll remind everyone in the audience that very often when you see depictions of court trials, you're going to see illustrations by guys that have pencils and paper because they can't even walk in there with a camera. I'm hoping all of that will change. And again, an excellent advocacy point for all of us to work on together to try to make those changes, because we have to protect ourselves. We cannot depend on anyone to do it for us.
Okay, well, fine. And
thank you.
Chris, we're going to let you go here. We're coming up on our final commercial break for the show. I think it's important that we just keep repeating the important part. There had been no Medicare, Medicaid fraud committed by your father. When they finished the audit, he was actually owed money, and still these prosecutors pursued this case in the hope of a settlement and a payout. That's not a justice system. That's a just us system. Got to take a 3-minute break here. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Last segment of our program today. We're finishing up here with Alfonso E. Chavez, who's just told this horrific story of the abuse of the justice system. Alfonso, we have about 4 minutes until the end of the show. What would you like to share with our listeners?
I'd like to reemphasize this point that we've been making throughout the show, that there is a possibility of a call to action by all of us. Remind the FBI agents, the good ones that are left, and I'm hoping that there's some good ones left out there, that it's within their purview to take matters into their own hands. This idea that they need to be given orders from above is non-existent. The way I read the law, my understanding of protocol and procedure is that each one of these agents, no matter whether they're the first day on the job or they've been there for 30 years, each of these agents is entrusted to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. They have every single authority to arrest anyone at any time, including their brothers and their sisters at the FBI. Now, if they want to fight about it afterwards, God bless them, because there's due process. Anyone that gets arrested is going to be afforded due process. But the responsibility is in the hands of each of these agents who's been entrusted to defend our Constitution, Mike. And if they do not do their job and start changing the culture of the FBI to go after anyone that is in violation of our laws and is a traitor to this country on many different levels, then I think you're right. I think we've lost hope. And that includes the warmongers, right, and everyone in between. If you go to the website of the FBI, and this was fascinating. I did this to research. I just did this yesterday in preparation for this show. The FBI's website lists only six cases which they deem to be historic in their entire 110 years of existence. And as a quick note, the FBI was founded in part by Charles Bonaparte, the great-grandnephew of Napoleon Bonaparte, who was an attorney general. Fantastic, piece of history which we can discuss or debate a different time. But if you go to the FBI website today, the 6 cases that are there are 1, February 1980, the Abscam case, March 1984, Operation Greylord, June 1988, Operation Illwind, April 2008, Tennessee Waltz, June 1972, Watergate, and 2005, the William Jefferson case. So what the FBI is telling us in their marketing effort on their website is that in the entire 110 years of their history, these are their milestone cases. You've got to be kidding me. They're talking about 3 cases from the 80s, 1 from 1972, right, and 2 from 2005 to 2008. This is what they have to be proud of? That's it? So either there's something wrong here, or they're not doing enough of what they should be doing every single day.
No, what they're doing can't be talked about. I mean, they're back to the same tactics they used during COINTELPRO, and they're not going to make that public. Again, the FBI is the American version of the Gestapo. And there's the music. So, Alfonso, it was a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for sharing the information, that history of your father's lawsuit. Again, thank you for being on the show today. We're going to let you go here. The music is now playing. It's time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. He's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here and share it with everybody. Talk to people. Use email. Use postal mail. Forget about social media. It's being turned into a giant wall of filters. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.
God bless you, Mike. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.